Hey there, welcome back to Ask Amy. I have a question today from Carly. Carly says, I came across your little School of Big Change and I want to hope that it could be helpful to me. However, my struggles stem from a horrible mistake and error of judgment that I made 27 years ago. She says, I'm now 49 years old. It's nothing criminal and it's not even uncommon, but I can't get past it. I know that I'm not solely to blame or responsible for this mistake. Nevertheless, I feel so much guilt, shame, and embarrassment every hour of every day. Are your teachings and programs helpful in this type of situation? She says, I also have issues with worry, rumination, negative self-talk, procrastination, which I think are addressed in all of your courses. Yes, and this issue with regret and shame and embarrassment is no different, Carly, from any of those. It's the exact same thing happening, which I'll speak to. She says, but this mistake I made was wrong, and there is no way to look at it in a positive way. I'm not comfortable describing it in detail in an email, but how do you forgive yourself and move on when something that you did was actually 100% wrong? So that's the real question. How do you forgive yourself and move on when something that you did was actually, objectively, in Carly's opinion, 100% wrong? So, Carly, I love that you're looking here because there is nothing, there is no way of being with this constant guilt. She says, so much guilt, shame, and embarrassment every hour of every day for 27 years. There is no deeper, clearer, more obvious way to be free of this than to see the illusion that is being created in your mind by this right now and every minute that you're experiencing this for the last 27 years. So you do not have to look at it in a positive way. She says there is no way to look at it in a positive way. That's fine. Yeah, that's not at all what you have to do. Not at all. You don't have to put another spin on this. You don't have to tell a different story about it. You don't have to try to convince yourself that maybe it wasn't that bad. All you need to do, but what is going to lead to freedom after 27 years of this for you, Carly, is being curious about what is actually happening. So I know your mind is telling you that was wrong. It was objectively wrong. It should have been different. It could have been different. You messed it up. And that has led to 27 years of nearly nonstop guilt and shame and embarrassment. But your mind is not truthful. There's no other way to say it. Like, that is what a mind will say. A mind will tell these stories, but what your mind is telling you is not the truth. All of this is hinging on a mind, an incredibly creative, it creates reality. It creates our reality. It's creating your reality. An incredibly creative mind that comes in and tells stories, and it relays past events. And we get so caught up in these stories. They look and feel so real that every one of us, all 8 billion of us, lose sight of the fact or miss the fact all the time that this is a creative mental process playing out, that this is not an accurate rendition of the truth for any of us. I'm not just saying because you've been suffering for 27 years. For sure there. We don't suffer for 27 years because of something that happened 27 years ago. That doesn't happen. How could that even happen? So for sure, you are suffering because your mind is telling a very, very creative, painful story and you're believing it. But so am I. And so is everyone on earth ever who is suffering, because this is just how this works. We are not in reality in this way. We are in our mind's creation of reality for us. And when there is suffering, that suffering is there to show us, hey, there's a lot of creativity happening. There's a lot of storytelling. There's a ton of meaning. There's a lot of coulda, woulda, shoulda. All of that leads to suffering, and that's exactly what you're describing, Carly. So you do not have to look at this in a positive way. You don't have to see it differently. None of that. It's way bigger than that. You don't have to jump into the story and tell a nicer story. Instead, what I want you to do is start to see how this story is created. It's like saying, how do I not be scared of this horror movie that's playing? Well, no one knows how you watch a horror movie and don't be scared, but you wouldn't try to talk I'm sure they're fine. And like, you see that it's a movie. That's your best bet. And then yes, when that movie's playing out, there might be some emotion that comes with it. But you see, oh, there's that scene and there's this storyline and here's this plot twist. It's a movie being created. And that's exactly what's happening for you, Carly, for all of us all the time. So all of this for you is centered around a few main ideas, but one, that things could have and should have been different than they were. If there was no way, if you saw, okay, things just played out the way they played out, that's it. Yeah, there would maybe be some suffering in the moment. There might even be some suffering now occasionally if you think about it, but there would not be what you're describing. So your mind is telling you should have done it differently. You could have done it differently. It could have been another way. Our minds are so good at this. They do this all the time. They create realities again, and we lose sight of the fact that it's images and sounds. It's literally like a movie being created in our experience. We think, oh yeah, that is what could have and should have happened. But how could things ever truly be different than they were? I really want you to sit with this, and this video is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much that you can see in this, Carly, that will absolutely lead to freedom from this. How could things be different than they are or than they were? They can't. They can't, and they couldn't have. It only looks like they can in our imagination. And I really mean that. I'm using that word very literally. In our imagination, our mind can make up an alternate set of facts, an alternate reality, and it does so constantly our whole lives. And then we start to confuse that with what really is. We think that's reality. That has nothing to do with reality, not even a little bit. It is the creative function of a mind. So your mind is saying you could have done it differently. You should have done it differently. If this had happened, then you'd be happy now. And that is just what a mind does. It plays out scenarios, it makes them up, it sells them to us as truth, and we buy them. We don't see. It's the same mind that's making them up as the mind that's saying, yep, that is what could have and should have happened. But it is the creative process of a mind. It's really no different than me being depressed because I should have been born with Whitney Houston's voice. Like, I surely was not, not even close. I should have been. I could have been. If I just had different parents, or maybe if they got me into singing lessons earlier. Man, I could have and I should have been born with Whitney Houston's voice. No, I could not have. I should not have. To live in that reality and the suffering that would bring would be a function of my imagination. It would be my mind telling that story and then believing it. Now, that may sound different to you because I'm saying I should have been born with Whitney Houston's voice, and that's beyond my control. And maybe you're not thinking this, but I know people are. Well, this was something I did. This mistake I made that mistake. That was on me. It's not like just being born with something. So let's look at that for a minute, Carly. Did you choose to make this mistake? Do you choose to do anything? Are you choosing to live in near constant guilt, shame, and embarrassment for 27 years? Are you choosing that? Are you really? Like, are you making it happen? How do you make it happen? How do you bring these thoughts and feelings up? What happens if you try and you can't? Like, where do they come from when they just show up for you? This is huge to start to see, but we are not making life happen. You did not make that mistake, Carly, whatever it was. You did not. I mean, of course you wouldn't, right? If you want to say that, oh, I'm in charge of what I do and I make my own choices, then why did you make that one? It's a very circular argument. You wouldn't have. But a mind says, oh, I did it and I was wrong. And it keeps us spinning in an imaginary story for 27 years. Well, there's a life out there for you to be living, but your mind is keeping you in this tiny little story. And there's benefit in that too, believe it or not, to your mind. Not really, but your mind is keeping you safe. It thinks it's keeping you safe. Now, it is not at all keeping you safe. It's robbing you of life for 27 years. But it thinks it's keeping you safe, so it'll keep telling the story. And you might keep believing it, but you don't have to, because you can start to see, again, it is not about you putting a nicer spin on it. It's about deeply, deeply seeing the creative process of how a mind works. Things happen. Choices are made. Behaviors are taken. Actions are taken. And then a mind comes in and says, I did that. I didn't do that one. I chose that. I made that happen. And that is just how a mind narrates life. A mind is not making the world happen. It is not leading to the unfolding of events. It really isn't. It's just constantly talking and taking credit for things and taking blame for things and blaming other people and then making up what should have happened. And the more we see how that works and how that's always working that way, and it's always been working that way, the freer we feel in anything. This is in anything in life. When we have a sense of how our mind works in this way and creates these realities, we just have a completely different relationship with it. We see it playing out, we feel it, and we know it's what a mind does. And it just doesn't look personal, and you for sure wouldn't live with this nearly every second of nearly every hour, she says, of every day for 27 years. If you really, really saw how it worked, if you really saw what was going on. So this shame and regret that you feel truly has nothing really to do with some event that is 27 years over. It can't. It is now, and a minute ago, and a minute in the future, which is always now. It is a mind creating, in this creative process, a mind in its creative storytelling of what could have been and should have been, and you are always at the center of it, and I'm always at the center of mine, and everybody is always in the center of their mind's drama. And man, it's a compelling story. And we go through life gathering evidence and seeing, yep, it works that way. But this is what I'm very excited for you for, Carly. Like, as people start to get in this conversation and look in this direction, we start to see how faulty all of that evidence really was. It's really not evidence at all. It's just a mind finding evidence for its beliefs, but it starts to get some really giant holes poked in it, and it starts to become so clear, like hilariously clear, that, oh, I didn't do that. And I'm not the one making my thoughts and feelings and actions show up. I'm just seeing the whole thing, and then my mind's taking credit for it. It just becomes incredibly clear. And again, as it becomes clear, just think about the implications of that. You would not live in this feeling for this long. So there is so much for you to see. And when you ask about worry and rumination and procrastination, they're all the exact same thing. They are all a mind talking about what could happen and don't do this. And, it's all this identification with mind that we can see through. People see this and they start to be less identified, and a ton of change and freedom happens when we get onto this. So I'm so glad that you are looking in this direction. Again, I know it's very different. It is for all of us initially. It goes against how we thought life worked, but in the best possible way. And there's so much here for you with all of that regret and shame. And you would die in a fit of laughter if you really saw what was going on, really. So please keep looking here. And I hope this is helpful. I hope it's helpful to others. And send your questions about anything at all to AskAmy at thelittleschoolofbigchange.com. And I'm here every Monday speaking to them. All right. Have a great week, everyone.